In May of 1967, Israel felt an Arab noose slipped around its neck. Egypt, Syria, and Jordan mobilized their modernized armies for synchronized war, with the backing of much of the entire Arab world and the Soviet Union. The Arab states broadcast their intention of fully annihilating Israel's inhabitants. Acting on deliberately false Soviet intelligence that Israel had mobilized to attack Syria, Egypt rolled its forces into the Sinai Peninsula on May 16th. All that kept the Israeli and Egyptian foes apart was a delicate line of blue, the UN's first attempt at armed peacekeeping. But on the same day, Egyptian President Nasser ordered the peacekeepers to abandon Sinai, clearing his path to the Israeli border. Upon receiving Nasser's demand, UN Secretary General U Thant did the unthinkable. He failed to consult the UN Security Council. He failed to ask Egypt to reconsider. He even failed to stall for time in the hope of resolving the crisis. Instead, he ordered his peacekeepers to immediately withdraw from Sinai. Israel's foreign minister, Abba Eban, subsequently complained to the UN. What is the use of a United Nations presence if it is in effect an umbrella which is taken away as soon as it begins to rain? Indeed, the region seemed closer than ever to an apocalyptic downpour. Israel was horrified by the UN's hasty withdrawal, but a contemporary CIA assessment insisted that Nasser was just as shocked that the UN had failed to call his bluff. John Hatton, the CIA chief in Israel in 1967, reported,
"For me, it was just like a little boy who's being held by his father, and the little boy is shouting, 'Let me at him, let me at him.' And he doesn't want to be let at him at all, but all of a sudden the father lets go of him." Nasser was being held by his shirt tails by having this UN front. And when he demanded that it disappeared, and no one was more surprised than he, I think.
On May 23rd, Egypt blockaded the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping in a deliberate attempt to provoke military conflict by effectively laying siege to Israel, which was now cut off from its primary oil supply route and its trade routes with friendly Asian and African states. Such a move was an act of war under international law, and Israel could not afford a prolonged blockade. As the noose began to tighten, Minister Eban described his country as breathing only with a single lung. As the Middle East tottered on the brink of anarchy, a panicked Israel pleaded with foreign countries and agencies to intervene, but was met with deafening indifference. It sent Minister Eban and Mossad chief Meir Amit on frantic missions to America and Europe in search of a diplomatic solution. The UN Security Council refused to take Israel's existential concerns seriously. An Emergency Security Council meeting insisted upon by Canada and Denmark ended with no clear conclusion. Its necessity repeatedly questioned and mocked by participant members. Thant did make a report regarding the withdrawal of UN forces and expressed concern. No actions were taken as a result. France refused to acknowledge any acts of aggression on Nasser's part. Instead, it strongly cautioned Israel not to strike preemptively. Britain offered sympathy for Israel and outrage against Egypt, but no action was forthcoming. And the United States, Israel's most important ally, refused to pledge to defend Israel militarily, even if it were attacked. It then tied Israel's hands by warning sternly that it would not support Israel at all if Israel conducted a preemptive strike, albeit in self-defense. Instead, the United States attempted to rally international support for a peaceful reopening of the Straits of Tiran by sailing an international flotilla through the blockaded canal. But its efforts were met with the same collective reluctance that only 2 decades earlier had silently abetted the murder of 6 million of Europe's Jews. Israel would have to break the noose on its own, despite being vastly outnumbered and facing enemies at every front. But could it? Desperation is the mother of resourcefulness. Israel's military calculated that the side that struck first had the most realistic chance of winning, They reckoned that surprise and air supremacy were the twin keys to the conflict, and developed a bold but risky plan. At precisely 7:14 a.m. on June 5th, almost every Israeli warplane took off, leaving only 12 behind to protect the country. They flew low across the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, slipping beneath Egyptian radar and under the range of anti-aircraft batteries, and arriving precisely while the enemy pilots were busy with breakfast. In wave after wave, following brilliant strategy, they attacked Egypt's numerous airfields across the length and breadth of the country, returning to Israel to refuel and rearm at the unprecedented speed of just 7 minutes. Israel destroyed the colossal Egyptian Air Force of some 300 planes and disabled its runways and air defenses in just 2 hours. Operation Focus, or Mifta Moked in Hebrew, formally started the 1967 war. But it gave Israel the coveted element of surprise, so that it needed not fight on its enemy's terms. It spared her from the potential loss of her own airfields and from painfully lopsided dogfights in the air. It ripped the carpet from beneath Nasser's feet and prevented him from blitzing Israel's civilians in fulfillment of his apocalyptic pledge to annihilate every last Jew in Israel. Most critically, Israel's preemptive strike enabled its air force to fully support its troops and armored units on the ground, a factor most favorable to the outcome of the war in the furious days that followed.